Good afternoon, everyone. This is Andrew Kolick with Alps Controls. I'm product manager here for core sensors, temperature, pressure, humidity, gas detection, leak detection, panels, panel devices, transformers, power supplies, relays, controllers, and thermostats. Today we have Bob and Sinead. They are with Smartcon. They are the integration experts for Milesight. And, well, I guess take it away, Bob and Sinead. Oh, before we begin, if you have any questions at all during the presentation, at the bottom of your screen should be a Q&A button. Feel free to type in your question. We'll be answering them at the end. And then after the presentation, we'll be selecting somebody to win a, let's see, what did Bob say? It was a screwdriver set. And the winner will be contacted by your Alps sales representative to get that into your hands. So Bob and Sinead, take it away.
Awesome, Andrew. I appreciate the introduction there, and I tell you, I love the Who. So good intro music there. Get the blood going this afternoon.
Oh yeah.
So we're going to go ahead and kick it off. Sinead, I tell you, Sinead has been just a huge asset to the Smartcon team. So glad she's leading this presentation today. So terrific. Sinead, I'm going to leave it up to you.
Perfect. And everyone can see, you can see my screen, Bob? Just want to make sure.
Yes. Yep.
Awesome.
All good.
All right. So we're going to jump in. Let me move to the next slide. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'm Sinead Guerin. I am with Smartcon. I have 15 years of industry experience in both energy and BMS world, just general infrastructure. I worked for Honeywell for a very long time. And now I'm with the Smartcon group focusing on hospitality, but Milesight is a big component of what we offer. So we have become experts in it. Today, we're going to walk through that Milesight equipment, this new product line for the Alps group, and it carries a strong opportunity for the team here. We're not going to cover every product. If anyone has been on the Milesight website, you know that there's a lot. But by the end, we want to make sure you have a solid understanding of some of the most commonly used solutions, who they're for, where they're typically applied. And it's really not just about knowing the products, but about knowing LoRaWAN and IoT as well. And making sure you can communicate that effectively. So why are we here? Why does any of this matter? At a high level, right? Your customers are dealing with problems they don't have visibility into. A lot of facilities teams don't actually know what's happening inside their buildings. They don't know the air quality. They don't know if spaces are being used. And they don't have clear insights into their assets. Because of this, there's a lot of inefficiency and wasted energy. There's HVAC running in empty rooms. There's no data to act on. There's leaks in areas where it's unoccupied. So with that, there's no one has the data to catch or fix it. And at the same time, expectations are increasing, right? With compliance and ESG, even with LEED and WELL, air quality standards, safety mandates, they're becoming more important, and customers are being asked to prove what's happening in their buildings. And wiring tends to be a big barrier, right? Traditional BMS sensors, that's the world I came from, but traditional sensors, they require expensive and disruptive install. This wireless, situation changes that. So Milesight LoRaWAN, it gives contractors a faster, cleaner answer to a lot of the problems that your customers are facing. So a little background on LoRaWAN, just so you know what it is. If you haven't heard the term before, think of it this way. It's like a cellular network, but built specifically for these sensors. Instead of streaming video or calls, right, you're just sending small packets of data, temperature, humidity, door status, things like that. What makes it powerful is the combination of the range of battery life. You can get up to 5 to 10 years on a single battery, depending on how frequently the data packets are sent. And the range is huge. It's about, a mile indoors, depending on the environment, hence the name Milesight. The sensors themselves, again, can run on a battery for 5 to 10 years, which makes these large-scale deployments really practical. So you have a couple of gateways, a couple of sensors in a building, and this system can run on its own for several years. From a US standpoint, it's going to run on the 915 frequency. So that's an unlicensed band. So there are no licensing fees, no spectrum concerns. It operates independently from the wireless or the Wi-Fi and the cellular. So it's completely separate. And that one gateway can carry up to thousands of devices. So as long as a device can see a gateway, it can run up to, something like 1,000 devices. We haven't tried to test that capacity just yet. We haven't gotten quite there, but we're getting close. So that's really the foundation of LoRaWAN. It's long range, low power, and a simple deployment. And how the network works is it's a star topology, so it's not a mesh. It's going to have a gateway, and the sensors are going to speak to that gateway. That gateway acts as a hub. This is why it's important, right? Because the sensors stay simple. They are to solve a problem in the space. And because they're very simple, it's really low code / no code setup. So once you're in there, you're going to fill out, a couple pieces of information to set up these sensors, but they're programmed for specific solutions to go in very specific locations and then all report to that gateway hub. Very little power with the simplicity, and this is why it's really important to keep it simple. We can install them and we can leave them there for years. I wanted to just have this here. We'll come back to this, but this is just how the topology would work. So you have your sensors here, and you'll notice we focus a lot on solutions, not just the sensors, right? So when I'm talking about the sensors, I'm really talking about the solution that the sensor solves. So tracking, fleet management, smart building, metering, these are all these sensors that are coming here. They're reporting to our gateway. And there's a couple gateways to choose from, and we'll get to that. From there, you're going to use some internet connectivity, 4G, Ethernet, backhaul. It's up to you. And you're going to connect to a network server. From there, you're going to take that data into an application layer. So just so you have an idea of how it flows all the way through as we talk about these. Now, how the network works compared to what customers are likely using today. So there's first Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, right? Your range is going to be limited, your power consumption is high, and they rely on existing IT infrastructure and support to function. So this can make it difficult to scale across a facility, as well crowded spectrums, right? There's a lot of equipment that advertises it can be on Wi-Fi. If you're in a commercial building or in an area, you have customers that are on the Wi-Fi. So it can become a very crowded spectrum. And then traditional BMS, the world that I come from, these systems absolutely have value. They are very important. Many of your customers may already have them, but they are typically wired, which means higher installation costs and more disruption to the staff. Expanding them later, right? If you don't do everything up front, when the walls are open and the property is new, retrofits can be very hard and time consuming. This is where LoRaWAN sits on a different lane, right? You're getting that long range, multi-year battery life, no wiring required, and it operates independently from all of these networks. Some just examples of areas this shows up, right? Offices, commercial buildings, healthcare, education, industrial, and warehouses.
Yeah, and Sinead, I know you'd mentioned about retrofits, but it just seems like there's a huge market there for Milesight and retrofits just because of the wireless backbone, no wiring needed, very easy to be able to do that. I know we're going to go through a couple of case studies or examples later on, but we'll definitely talk a little bit about the retrofit piece.
Yes. And then just so you have a little background of who Milesight is, they're a global IoT manufacturer. They have deployments in over 100 countries. Their focus is on LoRaWAN-based solutions. So this isn't something that they're doing on the side in addition to other types of solutions. They are completely focused on LoRaWAN solutions, and that's why their sensors and gateways and routers, they've developed an entire ecosystem. So you can build an end-to-end solution without having to piece together multiple vendors. Right, that's one of the biggest issues even with BMS or any building infrastructure is you are taking all of these different components and trying to make them work. This ecosystem is very open and it's very simple to build. They've made it that way. So when you're talking to customers about LoRaWAN and Milesight, right, there's 3 things to really lead with. It's easy to deploy with no wiring required. Battery life is measured in years, not months, and it scales easily from, a single sensor to thousands. You don't have to do everything right away. What this means for your business, right, moving into the LoRaWAN technology, it's a way to develop recurring revenue, monitoring analytics service, right? It can create a new monthly revenue stream, especially with something like leak detection. That is a risk management, right? It helps mitigate risk for our customers, and being able to consistently monitor it. That's great recurring revenue that the customers want. It's really good value prop. Faster deployment, you'll hear it over and over again, right? Less labor means faster revenue. Stand out from your competitors. It positions you as a smart building partner, not just a contractor, right? You're not just partnering with another group that can design a BMS system or has to come in and do all of these sensors. You can provide the solution yourself to the customer. That's how easy the ecosystem is. And it works nicely with existing tech stacks. So it does play very nicely with not just BACnet, but with APIs, with Modbus. It's an open system in that sense that their gateway really connects to a lot of different infrastructures. So there's no rip and replace required. We're not asking you to go in, right? We're not asking our customers, go in, take all this out. We're going to put this instead. This can go alongside their existing equipment that works. So helps you be the contractor who solves the problems before the customer sees them.
Yeah, so Sinead, I know you just mentioned about the integration with BMS, Niagara systems, all that. So there's no rip and replace, none of that is needed.
Correct.
Yep, nice and easy.
Yep. So every deployment, it's going to start here with the network, right? Without the gateway, the sensors have nowhere to report. Milesight has a range of gateways, but for most deployments, you'll be working with these three. This is what we tend to utilize the most. The UG63 is a very compact indoor gateway, great for offices, real estate, and standard commercial spaces. We tend to use it as a smaller area component. Sometimes when we need additional coverage and maybe a larger building or hotel, maybe a hotel with 1,000 rooms, we'll have one main UG65 and we'll have a couple of UG63s that report to the UG65. The UG65 is kind of our bread and butter. So this is the step up from the UG63, right? It's designed for larger floor plans and buildings where you want stronger and more consistent coverage from a single unit. This is an indoor gateway. If you are outside or if your connection is best outside, that sometimes happens, maybe in industrial areas or warehouses. That's when you would look at the UG67. This is rated for rooftops, warehouses, and just harsher environments in general. Typically, you're looking at, one gateway per floor or area, depending on the layout or construction of the building. So for a hotel, a smaller hotel, I can use one gateway for a whole hotel. However, if you do run into large concrete blocks, other, big elevator banks, you might have to just make sure you're seeing around those areas. And that's when we use UG63. So it's best to they have a very long range. We just want to make sure nothing is blocking it. So the placement of that UG65 is very important. From a deployment standpoint, these are very simple plug and play. You don't really need deep networking expertise. I personally don't have it, and I've deployed many of these. And this doesn't sit outside existing systems, as Bob had mentioned. Milesight integrates into platforms like Niagara using a BACnet driver, so this data can feed directly into your existing systems. So before anything else, right, you're utilizing these gateways to build the backbone, and then all the sensors we're going to cover layer on top of that.
And what I can tell you is, I know we've got a warehouse project we're working on, 45 acres under roof, very few gateways. It's amazing the range that these gateways offer.
And so once your network is in place, we'll start adding sensors. I've broken them out today into categories that we utilize. The first being environmental monitoring. So when we talk about environmental monitoring, we're thinking about everything that matters inside a building: air quality, temperature, humidity, whether space is occupied. And you can mix and match these, right, across one LoRaWAN network. So the reason I bring that up is if you have temperature and humidity, indoor air quality, you don't have to choose one sensor per space, right? You can, of course, but and we'll cover occupancy in the next slide, occupancy, light, and sound, you can tie that into a temperature sensor as well. So you don't, there are ones like the indoor air quality, which has multiple measurements on it, but you can make it as simple as you want or as complicated as you want. So temperature and humidity, they have a lot of these sensors. The two we utilize the most are the EM300 and the EM320. These are just wireless, room, and surface sensors. The 320 is actually rated, it's food grade, so we use it a lot in refrigeration areas. But uncontrolled temperature and humidity, right? Product loss, energy waste, compliant risk. Without the monitoring, issues are going to become unnoticed. You have a refrigerator that's running at an incorrect temperature. You may not know that until you open it up and all your food is spoiled. Indoor air quality, it's a big concern, not just for compliance and ESG, but for safety. So there are different levels for Milesight, everything from a 2-in-1 to a 9-in-1, and you'll see different levels at each sensor. So the first will be, temperature and humidity, and then it'll start going up into CO2, VOCs, particulate matter. Sorry, that word was a little hard. Barometric pressure. Those are going to be added once you start getting into the 5-in-1s and the 7-in-1s. We tend to use the 7-in-1s because that's where we can utilize the CO2 and VOCs as well as the pressure. They're all in that 7-in-1. And we utilize them in stairwells to make sure that the building is pressurized properly, right? That's one way of huge waste and humidification issues is if you have a properly improperly pressurized building. So instead of multiple devices, right, these indoor air quality sensors solve several problems for us. Continuing on to environmental monitoring. And again, we're only showing 2 to 3 of the sensors that are available here. There are many. So, don't think you're just limited to this. But here we have our PIR sensor as well as a sound sensor. We utilize these a lot when it comes to occupancy in spaces. We've even used the sound sensor in mechanical areas where you're listening, right, for a motor, for anything. If it sounds too loud, it's a problem. It gives an alarm. Contact and pulse are also unique. So while the contact sensor themselves can be used for access doors or windows or balconies, we like to use them in other areas, right? Think of anything that can open and close. So one that we utilize is that middle one, the EM300 MCS. We utilize it in refrigeration. So we'll have a temperature sensor within the refrigerator itself, and then we'll have one on the door. So that MCS is actually both a contact sensor and a temperature sensor. So we'll know the delta across the refrigerator, but we'll also know when it's open, how long it's been left open. So that way it doesn't trigger an alarm if, right, the temperature dips. Well, we know the reason why. If the temperature dips and it's been left open for 20 minutes, that's a concern, right? And then the EM300 DI, this is a really nifty device. So it's a pulse counter itself, where if you have a demarc point from any of your meters, you can tie this in, and we do utilize it in that way with water, gas, and electricity. So you can get visibility into those meters without replacing the meter. But what we've also utilized is you can tie this into any dry contact. So we've used it on generators, we've used it in other alarm systems where there isn't an alarm that connects to the building's BMS system, but there is a dry contact output that will trigger a change in status, right? And it can trigger this pulse counter and give us that alarm on our end. So that's actually been a unique way of utilizing these sensors. So facility monitoring, now we're going to move into this. It's a little different, but it's still about visibility. So this is more, not just understanding the space, it's actually seeing the specific equipment problems, risk, and usage, right? Things that can go wrong in the equipment. So leak sensors, energy consumption, equipment data are really what we feel fall into this category. Leak detection, you'll hear it over and over again because it is the most popular item. I turn out quotes all the time on leak detection. It is the biggest issue that we are solving for across all of our customers. Some customers even go with just leak detection and nothing else to start. So there are 4 different types of sensors Here you'll see three of them: the spot sensor, the zone sensor, and the membrane sensor. The spot sensor has a probe. It's good under large pieces of equipment like domestic hot water, laundry, in kitchens, any area where water may pool. The zone sensor is a rope sensor, so that yellow line extends. It's about 6 feet. It can go along walls. It can go along cracks. It can go along racks of equipment. However, wherever you feel you have water intrusion, that's where a zone sensor would be important. And then the membrane, just less popular in hospitality, more popular in data centers and warehouses. This can sit under key pieces of equipment. It can be cut as well from, this large piece to really fit that equipment. This will give you, a full monitoring point of everything under that sensor. These three are my preferred sensors out of the Milesight grouping because these have a battery life of about 10 years. Again, depending on the program, but about 10 years. There is a WS303, which is a mini leak sensor. It operates essentially the same as, the spot sensor, but it's, a tiny little, it looks like a little white ant trap. It's great. It lasts only about 5 years because it is on a small battery, but you can just replace the battery as well. We tend to utilize those in customer-facing applications just because it is very visibly non-intrusive. Following leak, energy currents, and energy and current monitoring is the next thing that a lot of customers ask us for. So you'll notice on the right, you have the CT10 series, and then the split core current transformer series. So this is single phase and 3-phase. There are different amperages that they go up to, 3 in each category. This allows us to sub-meter equipment, right? So any exhaust fans, any single phase fans, you can use the CT10 series. Any 3-phase, you're going to use that CT core, the 3 split one. What Milesight has just released, it's just not part of this presentation, is their next current transformer. This is great for mechanical rooms where you have multiple loads in one area or on one bracket. What you can do is install it directly with, either within or next to the bracket, and you're able to connect up to, and therefore any other combination, up to 4 3-phase devices. So it could be 4 3-phase devices, it could be 3 3-phase devices, and 3 single-phase devices. There's 12 basically inputs that you can work with in that space. So it's really helpful for mechanical rooms where we're asked from customers, all right, I'm looking at all of my pumps or all of this. I want to know what's going to my pool, what's going to my laundry, what's going to my kitchen. We can now break that out for them. So the CTs and the leak sensors, you're going to become very familiar with. Controls, right? Everything we just talked about was monitoring, knowing what's happening. Controls is where the system starts doing something about it. Smart thermostats are huge. We have the WT201, the WT303, and the WT304. They also just released the WT401. So the 201 is your entry-level option. It's used in residential, light commercial applications, think 24-volt. The 303, 304, you're going to utilize that mostly for fan coil units. And then the 401 will be the advanced model. So this has, broader HVAC system compatibility, as opposed to just, that simple 24-volt from the WT201. You can actually monitor larger pieces of equipment utilizing that 401. And within that, right, you can do some programming as well. So you can set dead bands, you can set temperatures, you can tie it to a PIR sensor or a sound sensor, occupancy sensor of some nature, an access sensor, right? This can all speak in that access control to control those thermostats. Lighting control, you're going to see there's 3 on the page here. The one on the left, the most left, is the actual current controllers. So that works in tandem. The WS 558 works in tandem with the 156 and the 136. The 156 and 136 are the scene controllers. So they don't have hardwire, they are actually battery. So they can go live in, if you have, you want to change out your light sensors or you want to institute some control, but you don't want to wire everything out of the panel, you don't have to. These control from in, say, a conference room. You can have certain scenes set and it'll connect to that W558 in the closet. And that will speak to that. That's what actually is the controller on the back end. So I just like to differentiate there. It's a huge advantage as someone who has worked in energy efficiency lighting and you try to do dimming and you can't because of whatever is going on with the switch there. You can blank out that switch. You can put in a scene controller and you can control it, from the panel itself. Removes a lot of concern there. So, right, lights turn off when the space is empty. You want to have certain lights if it's dimmed or if it's, presentation mode. You can do all of that. There's up to 6 different settings and you don't have to utilize all 6. The buttons on the left one, the WS136, are technically customizable. So if you have a customer and they're like, I want to see this, this, and this, it can be done.
And Sinead, I know we're running short on time here, but as far as the product mix here, and you've got a lot of folks here that are attending today that are pretty new to the IoT world. What are some just really quick wins for these folks? I know you talked about leak detection, which I know is being driven a lot by the insurance companies.
Leak detection.
Yeah. So what would
leak
be just
detection is a big one.
Yeah.
I will say smart metering in a very right. So that would be the current transformers.
Okay.
I would also say contact and pulse, just are doors open or not. Those are very easy things to also integrate to. And I really do believe in the lighting one. That's a very easy, it's a lot easier of an install than trying to bring in a full lighting contractor, right? You can bring in the controllers into the panel. What we're also going to talk about is, so the controllers in IO, we don't really need to dig into just yet because we're short on time. Those just enact any of the changes, right, for HVAC. But what I find interesting is the smart button as well as the smart sockets. These smart sockets can control a device as well as monitor the current for it. For some in-room, like if you have an AC that's in the wall, sometimes multi-dwelling units are built that way. How do you monitor something like that? Well, you can control it actually now utilizing this. The power button will let them turn it on and off, but you can control it from the back end, enable, disable, kick it on and off at certain times, as well as monitor the current from it. As well as the smart socket button, the button will let you do anything. It's basically a command in the space. So world's your oyster with that one. There's 3 different commands. If you wanted to set an IT mode, call a person in, whatever you program it to do, it can be done. Let's see.
Yep. And just a reminder, anybody that has any questions for the attendees,
Yes.
Go ahead and post in the chat right now, and we're definitely going to address those questions afterwards here.
Yep. Just bringing this back, right? So your sensors in the space, those sensors that we talked about, talk to your gateway, to your network server, and the application server is really where you're going to see the big wins, right? So I have both the just general connectivity, but also here you'd have a local LMS embedded in your gateway. That's how you would connect to the BACnet and work through the Milesight driver to Niagara. So I just wanted to have this up here too. So again, if you don't have a BMS system, absolutely fine. If you do, also absolutely fine. Both can connect. That application layer is really where you see the value, right? So who you're working with is going to be important and how you're displaying the information that comes in. All of these sensors are bringing in key and critical information from their pieces of their, respective pieces of equipment. Information is great, but it's what you do with it that's the most important. So cloud monitoring, analytics, right? You want a single pane of glass, so there'll be one dashboard, everything's coming in to one area, historical analytics, real-time alerts, and then again, integrating with the BMS. But those really historical analytics and real-time alerts, I see as a very big value draw here. And back to Bob's point, right, the typical product solutions that we see the most are IAQ and comfort. Are we reaching temperature? And is it, safe in the space? Leak and fault detection. So what's going wrong with my equipment? Any spikes in energy as well, right? Energy and submetering. And then occupancy and HVAC. Those are sort of the 4 categories that we tend to see these sensors fit in solution-wise. I do have a couple of use cases by vertical that we can come back to. Just, we can talk through them specifically. Hospitality, student housing, commercial, warehouse, data centers. These are all proposals that, I have personally put together. The commercial building was sort of a deep dive into it. So this is our kind of last slide, right? Commercial building IoT network. So I'll go through this one a little more in detail. Temp and humidity sensing, IAQ monitoring, occupancy sensing, lighting control, energy, leak, people counting. We're pulling in all of this information to work together. So we'll notice if a person is in the space and control the lighting, control the HVAC, kick on the IAQ monitoring, right? You can do demand control ventilation by measuring the amount of CO2 in an area. You don't have to always run the exhaust at 100%. You can control the damper to let out a certain amount of air depending on how many people are in there, right? If 100 people are in a room, it's a bigger concern than only if, 5 are in there. Again, it reports to your LoRaWAN gateway. You're going to have an integration platform. It could be Niagara, Milesight, another API. You are not limited to what you connect it to. So I know we talk a lot about BMS. Doesn't have to be at all. But the application outcomes are really where customers see once you get them connected, that this is what they're going to be asking for, right? They're going to ask for insights into their space. They're going to ask for alerts on their leak detection. They're going to ask about the temperature trends in the certain areas. So the application layer is really key in making sure that you deliver a great solution for your customer. We like to focus on, again, solutions, not the sensors, right? No one's like, I need a WS202 today. They think my energy bill's too high and I had a leak last year and it cost me a fortune, right? My ESG report's due tomorrow and I have no data. So we always say, focus on getting what the problem is with your customer. There is probably a Milesight solution, right, to go with that. Not all these sensors have to be used in the way, like the pulse counter. It can be utilized in a way that isn't exactly pulse counting, right? But it's still solving that problem. So lead with cases and keep it simple. If you can't explain the value right in one sentence, we need you to simplify it. They're not complicated products, so they shouldn't sound complicated. It's a very easy system. So that's all I have for our kind of presentation, but I'm here for any questions that we have.
Okay, so Sinead, we did have a couple questions that came up. What security issues have you encountered with the 915 megahertz ecosystem? Are there any backdoor security risks? Any concerns on that aspect of it?
So we haven't. We utilize in the Milesight system, you can set an app key. So your sensor talks directly to your gateway. You can utilize the default, which will just duplicate. It's still secure, but it's just not as secure. So I would just recommend there are built-in securities in the Milesight ecosystem to use an app key ID where you marry that sensor directly to that gateway, and therefore that sensor can't be talked to or that gate, right? No one can get into either. That's a direct connection. It's that star topology.
Yep, awesome. It's got a bunch of questions here, boy. These are great. I love hearing the questions.
Bob, you want me to ask the question? So you and Sinead
go for it, Andrew. You can do it. Go for it.
All right. We have one from Alan Bush here. Can you show what the BACnet IP export looks like if I want to bring the data into another BACnet device without using Niagara?
I don't have an export live here, but it's pretty simple from their dashboard. I can literally tell you the buttons to click. When you go into device management, so there's going to be a web GUI for the gateway. And once you add your devices there, you can import them in bulk, but you can download them all in bulk, and that'll give you all of the credentials that you need to import them, whether you're utilizing MQTT or BACnet. Once you use that download, you'll be able to get all of that information from it. I just don't have a sample, to pull up here. Mostly because it's proprietary customer data.
All right, Philip Moody says, is there a low voltage version of the WT303/304? Looks great, but the 115 VAC is a bit of an issue.
So the WT201, I believe, would solve that problem. I would say look at that. That's sort of the lowest version of the thermostats. Milesight also works with us a lot. So, personally, we wanted a more advanced one than even the WT401. And we're helping, them create their next product. So if there is something that's not on the market, they are more than willing to create it for us.
And
but I think the WT201 would probably solve that problem.
Great. Philip Moody also asks, how well do the gateways work vertically? For example, in a 10-story building. I realize every situation is different, but generally speaking.
I've noticed they work better vertically than they do horizontally. So vertically, we really haven't had any issues. It's been the biggest issue I've ever seen is we had a 14 elevator bank horizontally in a hotel. So we ended up staggering them sort of like here, and here. So yeah, okay. Vertically, we've had no issues, honestly. But typically, if we have a very tall building, we might install one halfway through and then one at the top. So you're kind of covering both ways. It really depends on the system, but the gateways are relatively cheap, that adding a second or a third one does not break the bank or the project. And that's where I suggest the UG63 over the 65, just because it adds a bit more coverage without having to go, full bore for a 65.
Alan Bush asks, on the first page of devices, there was a ceiling device pictured. It showed temperature. Can you talk about that?
So I don't know what the exact device was. I can go back into it. Oh, that's the vape sensor. So they do have a vape sensor there. I just didn't include it in the list of equipment there, but they do have vape sensing and smoke sensing as an option.
Alan Bush also asks, so would I get to say an AV for a point that I could refer to in another BACnet controller?
That would have to happen though on the application layer, right? So anything of that nature, so if when we control our LoRa, we're sending the signal from our application layer. We work with a system called Neuro. So our Neuro system, if we're taking the information from a BACnet controller that's on a BMS system, then we're taking it in, working on our application layer, and then sending it to the LoRa gateway. If it's a BACnet controller that we are integrating to, so we didn't dig in too much on the controllers themselves, but there's a UC100 as well as a 300. The UC100 actually reads Modbus. The 300 reads BACnet directly. So if you have BACnet devices in the field that are maybe not connected to a BMS, we actually did this at a hotel where they had a domestic hot water system that had a BACnet controller, and we were able to use the 300 to bring in those BACnet points, actually utilizing LoRa, that we were able then to control through the LoRa gateway. So it just depends on the connection, but the commands, we tend to push them through from our application layer to the gateway. It can be done in the gateway itself. They utilize Node-RED as just the logic control.
Garrett Flutie asks, any experience with the Milesight EG71?
We are testing that, so I will let you know once we have a call tomorrow morning with our engineering team to go through it. So we think it's really promising. It should actually act as like a, right now LoRa is very separate based on my last answer. That should hopefully resolve the 71. My only concern with the 71 at this point, if we're going to just be frank, is the storage capacity. So when we talk about historical data or trends or things we want to, coming as a BMS engineer and energy engineer, I want to utilize the building's history before enacting something. To have that storage, it does need to be off of the 71. There is just a capacity concern for, a full BMS, but it is promising, and I'm hoping, tomorrow we're testing it right now in our lab. So I don't have too much on it right now, but it does look promising. I still would recommend having an application layer though, and where you're hosting your data.
Great. Alan Bush asks, does the gateway have a BACnet device instance?
So the gateway won't have the BACnet. It will have a BACnet instance that it can talk BACnet, but it won't interact directly with BACnet. Again, you need that application layer built in between the two.
Okay, another question from Alan Bush. Basically, I need to map a LoRaWAN sensor point to a Distech BACnet IP controller.
So I'm trying to figure out the exact topology of this. So you have a Distech BACnet IP controller, and you want to map a LoRaWAN sensor point to it. Okay. Yeah, so that would be through, again, we utilize Neuro as our application layer. We've actually mapped to Distech before, so we'll bring in Distech in, right? It's working up in here. And then we have our LoRa sensors, so that the sensors, it all speaks through, again, the application layer. You can do that. We personally just haven't because we utilize a very specific system. You can do that through Node-RED, though. That is possible to bring in the Distech BACnet information into Node-RED, as well as the LoRaWAN sensor information into Node-RED, and have it all work there.
Okay. We have an anonymous question here. Can Milesight devices integrate with existing BMS and Niagara-based systems, or do they require a complete platform replacement?
They'll integrate in the same sense as these other ones, right? So we add them on as we'll have a BMS Niagara system. I just designed one for a hotel in Philly where they didn't have control over certain components that had BACnet devices. So our platform is bringing in the BMS and the LoRaWAN into our platform. You are able to integrate the LoRaWAN into a, BMS platform, but you would have to work with that BMS controller. So if it's Honeywell or JCI, right, you'd have to get someone who can do that portion of it to actually integrate to it, which is why we tend to have our own application layer, our own software that we bring everything into. Another option, again, is utilizing the innate system with Node-RED and doing the programming that way. There's a lot of ways to connect to it. It is different, I will say, on every customer site. So we'll get some sites where they're just LoRaWAN and we're controlling using the LoRaWAN. There's some where they want us to control the LoRaWAN through the BMS. Again, we just have to make those connections. And then there's other times where we're connecting just to our application layer and just marrying the two so that way they talk back and forth to each other.
Okay. Another question, how quickly can a contractor typically install and commission a Milesight wireless sensor network?
So what we find is the best process is we bring the gateways to our head engineering office and we program them before they go to site. Sometimes, depending on how quickly we want to deploy, we will actually assign them to specific locations. So they're, literally just dropping the sensor there. So for example, we were doing the leak detectors in every hotel room. We only have a certain amount of time before we get in there. So we pre-programmed the gateways, we pre-programmed the sensors. So they go in, they're dropping them. If they're doing that in person, some had to be reprogrammed. 10, 15 minutes to activate the device. It's really not a long time. These are very quick deployments. Takes a little bit to get used to. So you'll take, just for everyone, it's the NFC is what you're going to utilize. So there'll be a Milesight toolbox app on your phone. So you program the gateway utilizing their web interface. You connect to it via Wi-Fi, and there you'll program just a couple of settings. You want to just enable it on the Milesight platform so you can see it remotely. Any network information, if you have it on, LTE versus internet, both are an option. So if you can't be on a customer's Wi-Fi, that's perfectly fine. You can do LTE. So you'll do the network settings in there. You'll then add the devices. Once the devices are added, we recommend adding the devices before activating them. Add the device. You'll go to the device itself with your phone, open the Milesight toolbox, and just use your NFC. You tap the back of it. All of the information that you need to fill out will be there. You just activate it, turn the sensor on, and then you can check, each of the pieces. We do, again, recommend that app key ID. So you would program that, basically a secure code that your company knows for maybe that site, that project. Has to be just 32, letters or numbers. You would program that into the gateway when uploading that piece of equipment, and then utilizing the app key ID, you would just put it into the sensor itself. And that makes sure there's a secure line directly from that sensor to the gateway itself. We recommend we utilize the same app key ID for every sensor on a gateway, but we have a system that we've designed where it kind of encrypts. Each site is a little different on how that app key is generated. But we've deployed, I think we did 300 toilet sensors in 3 days, in a hotel, and that was getting into the hotel room. So it's very quickly, once you start getting used to this, 15, 20 minutes to set up a gateway, 5, 10, maybe 15 if the sensor's being finicky on a sensor. And pre-programming can be easily done. It's very, very quick.
Great. Another question from Perry Klauser.
He has a good, the BACnet and gateways. Yep.
Yeah. So yes, how does Modbus fit into the network architecture? Can it be used to monitor and control through Modbus communication?
So it can. Modbus works as well. The UC100 is basically, I like to call them the translators. So the UC100 is the Milesight translator. We can connect to a Modbus interface and pull in those Modbus points, translate them to that LoRaWAN language, and bring it up that way. It's very helpful in what we call select service hotels. So a lot of hotels or commercial buildings where they've never installed a BMS, so they have 10 air handler units and there's nothing connecting them. We can utilize the Modbus, so the UC100, or the BACnet, the UC300, and there's even a 500. But between those two, we're able to connect to each of those thermostats, translate them basically right into LoRaWAN, and bring them into the system without having to deal with the BMS.
Well, Perry
It
asked,
is simple, Perry.
Perry, yeah,
I swear it's really simple. Like I come from the BMS world. I was it has to be a hardwired girl for a long time, and I've been changed.
Yeah, Perry asked if there's any online training available.
They do. Well, my one thing is they do lack in videos, but the documentation, I will say, on their website is they have basically like a Gitbook wiki. It's very easy to navigate, but if there's any questions, right, we can answer them pretty quickly. Their Gitbook does give you kind of step-by-step practice. I would recommend, just get a couple sensors and play with them in a lab. You learn a lot, and you learn a lot of unique ways to utilize the sensors. Again, they don't always have to be, hey, it's a leak sensor. Hey, it says yes, but that's just what it does, right? Again, what problem are we truly solving for? And we've come up with some fun and unique ways of applying this equipment.
Great. And then we have a question, what differentiates Milesight from other sensor and IoT manufacturers in today's building automation market?
So what I find differentiates Milesight the most is just how easy the ecosystem is and how open the system is. While it's its own little ecosystem with the sensors and the gateways, it connects very easily to other pieces of equipment. If you need the information in MQTT or BACnet, however you need to get that information out, they are more than willing, right? They're focusing on this one section. I find with other IoT systems, and Bob and I were actually just working on a data center that was at, I forget what the other brand was. You couldn't export the information. You had to utilize their platform, their interface to look at the data. You couldn't pull the data out of it. Milesight, they don't have a platform for the data because they expect you to have the platform for the data, right? And you to utilize whatever platform you want. They just want to give you and get you the data.
It looks like we've answered all of them. So
feel free to reach out if there are other ones, right? They come up for me daily too.
If anybody has any questions, you can always send me an email, contact csr@alpscontrols.com. That would put you in contact with our customer experience team. And we have Perry Klauser says, I've used WattSense, no comparison, right?
No, not really.
So, yeah, if you guys have any questions afterwards, you're thinking of, after this presentation, feel free to contact me, contact our customer experience team. They'll forward it over to me. I can get Bob and Sinead involved and get you answers, and we're more than happy to help any way we can. Yep.
Then again, the system really, it's designed to be simple, so it's not just it's open to everything. It's easy to, if you're not a controls person, you can still design and install and control. And that's why I think Milesight sort of wins in my mind, is it's the control for people, right? We think of AI and there's low code, no code. It's kind of the low code, no code of controls, in my opinion.
Great. All right, as I said before, at the conclusion of this, we will pick a lucky winner for the Smartcon screwdriver set, and the winner will be contacted. And that's all we have for everyone here. So, all right. Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.